We on? Are we live? We're good. Okay. Committee will call the meeting to order. I want to thank Representative Highland for sitting at the kids' table today. So, didn't realize we could fit this many people in the room, but thank you everybody for coming. Department of Labor is a hotbed of questions over the last couple of years. We've asked them to do a presentation. They sent a slide deck that is like 91 pages. But we told them that we would look through that, and we thank you for your work on all that. I'll have you back to the House Commerce to go through the whole presentation. But specifically today, we want to talk about the unemployment issues, where we are in resolving them, and focus basically on the main hot buttons that we're all being asked about from our constituents. So I've told the department that we would give them 20 minutes to go through a presentation. They can hit the high points of other items, but we wanted them to focus on unemployment. And then we would have time to ask questions. I bet there's going to be a lot of them. So with that, I'll call up Madam Secretary. Are you doing the presentation today? Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, for inviting us to present to you today. So it seems like April was just yesterday, but it has been several months since we were last up here in front of you. So a lot has changed, and so we hope that some of the information that we present to you will help your committees with the policies. Thank you. That you'll be pursuing in this session. So today we pared down our presentation for you. The information that you have in the packets has a lot of information about labor statistics, which we thought was important for you to know that we have those available as we come out of this economic and labor recovery. So I have with me today, I have Deputy Secretary Peter Brady, our CIO Kelly Johnson, and Angela Berland, who will be covering briefly some of the labor information. So with that, I want to remind everybody we've done a lot since we last saw you. We implemented a lot of the provisions of House Bill 2196, including the My Reemployment Plan, ID verification with law enforcement officers, and we've been working very closely with the Unemployment Modernization Council. And then we've also recently implemented House Bill 2001, which was passed, as you know, in the special session, allowing for complaints against employers who have COVID-19 vaccination mandates. And then just a reminder that in September, all of the federal unemployment programs ended. So again, not going to sugarcoat that 2021 was a very, very difficult year. So we are in a much, much better place, but I definitely want to acknowledge we still have a ways to go. So with that, we are looking ahead to 2022. So I will bring up Director Angela Berland, and she can talk a little bit about some of the economic market information.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I will preface this by saying this is my first time. I'm usually in the background providing numbers, so I'm not usually the presenter. So if you bear with me a little bit. And I think of the 90-some slides, most of them were mine, so I will jump through a lot of those for you. A lot of it's just also reference, so you know where to find our data on our website. We do have a lot of data, so this way just kind of give you a future reference of where to find some of the stuff that we do have. Is it this one? Sorry. Okay. Again, I'm Angela Berland. Actually, I'm recently married, so I'm now Angela White. So if you see my name change, I'm in the process of name change, which is not fun for those of you that have done it. I have been with the Kansas Department of Labor over 20 years, all within the LMIS section. I started as a part-time intern my last year at Washburn. So I love what we do. We have a lot of data. We are funded by the U.S. Department of Labor. We have 2 grants, one under the Bureau of Labor Statistics and one under the Employment and Training Administration. We also have multiple partners that we work with as they need labor market statistics for whether it's grant, economic development, improvements, whatever their needs may be. And as you can see, we do a lot of work with Commerce, the Education and Board of Regents. We have the Kansas Career Nav website that we did together through the Workforce Initiative Grant. Our main objective is just to provide accurate, timely, unbiased labor statistics for the state of Kansas. We have statistics that I'll go through some of our resources that we have and data products that we have. We do an annual economic report. These are some of the things I'll kind of briefly talk about that are all in your packet in more detail. That is for the statewide, the state of Kansas, and for the 5 Kansas local areas. Unemployment rates, obviously, we release that every month, so hopefully you see that. That goes down to the statewide metropolitan areas, counties, WIB areas, and also the largest cities that we have in Kansas. The Kansas Wage Survey, that is the wages that Kansans make reported by Kansans. Long-term and short-term industry and occupational employment projections, those are 10-year and 2-year. High-demand occupations and high-demand, high-wage occupations, which are derived from the data sets above, and then the monthly job estimates that hopefully you're also familiar with. Again, a lot of the slides are just where to find our information. So from our main website, that's where you can find us. The economic report, again, just so you know, it's an annual report. It's statewide, 5 local areas, and we talk about population, labor force, jobs and wages by industry, unemployment insurance data, so the claims data, occupational employment and wages, and the 10-year projections. And we release that every month around September 1st. Again, this is where you can find it, and then just a little snippet of what it has to offer. That is also a long document. We like to give a lot of data. Labor force statistics, it's a local area unemployment statistics program. This we release every month. It's the unemployment rate, the labor force, employment, and unemployment. The estimates are, like I said, available for Kansas, MSAs, counties, and cities of 25,000 or more. And this, the concepts and the definitions come from the current population survey. So it's a household survey. That's a source of the national unemployment rate. The unemployment rates are not derived from unemployment claims that are filed. Again, just for your reference in the future, this is who's included in the labor force when we talk about who's employed and unemployed for the rates, and who's not included, just so you kind of know who's counted and who's not. And then I included a bunch of statistics that I won't go over. These are examples of what we released. We just released all of this data last Friday through our labor report. It's the end of the year data. The next one will be in March, where we kind of benchmark all of our data to the survey data to actual administrative data. So again, this is data that you can get every month, and we can provide it to you, or it is on our website, and I'll show you where it's on our website. Again, just the Kansas unemployment rate history trend. Where can you find it? This is we call it the CLIck website. So when you click on LMIS from the U.S. Department or the Kansas Department of Labor, it's the Kansas Labor Information Center is what we call it. And that box right there will always have the most up-to-date labor report information that we just released. And when you click on that, it gives you all of these files that you can find, again, every month. There's always an economic, from our labor economists, we'll put out a monthly review. And so all of these charts that we'll go over that you'll see are always in that review also. This is where you can find that. Again, if you kind of want to drill down to your own areas, the Laos data does go by county, so we're able to add that up and do whether you have congressional districts, regional districts, any kind of areas to sum up. That's how we get the local area unemployment rates. So since we are able to do that, we just add it up since it is down to the county level, and that is every month. Job estimates by industry. So this is the count of jobs that we release every month. So it's called the Current Employment Statistics. It's a survey that we do in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and we survey Kansas employers, and we ask them who was on their payroll the week of the 12th, part-time, full-time. And so it's a count of where the jobs are. We do this for statewide and the metropolitan areas monthly. And this also goes down into different industries. So leisure, hospitality, retail trade, manufacturing. So we can kind of give you that every single month also. Again, this is just a history of what's been happening with jobs, and as the pandemic hit and as we recover out of the pandemic, what we've seen. Obviously, leisure and hospitality we wanted to highlight because that was one of the one's biggest hit, and how they're recovered. So again, if you have more questions in the future or after this. Trade transportation was the second industry hit, the hardest, and it's come back. And then manufacturing. Manufacturing, unfortunately, always gets hit during the recessions, and they don't normally usually come back to their pre-recession levels. Again, this is where you can find the CES data. It's on our labor report. And those are the jobs data numbers. The wage survey. The wage survey is a volunteer survey that we send out to Kansas employers, and we ask them what are the occupations that they have in their company and how much are they paying them. This way we can get an idea of who's working where and how much they're being paid. This is has a national standard called the Standard Occupational Code, which is called the SOC code. So all the analysts across the nation are trained to code them as similar as they can so that you can compare across geographies, across your state, and across the nation. And again, that goes down to the county level data. We do provide wages. Not all occupations of the 800 occupations that are available by each county. It depends on response rates, but we are able to give you a different county. We have experienced wage, median wage, entry-level wage, and then around how many estimated employment are in each of those occupations. That is also annual that we release that. Again, just some examples of how we present the data and how it's given. Again, this is just local area 5 that we just kind of picked out. And then all the areas where you can find it. It's in the purple box on our click page. And then that's the Excel sheets if you kind of want to find your own county's data and play around with it. We've moved to Tableau, and I'll show just the website for our tableaus in the end of this presentation. So it's visually appealing, but it's not always useful for data users, so we try to always still include the Excel sheets, which, as you can see, get kind of cumbersome. But we are also available if you want to work through Julie too. We do a lot of ad hoc data requests. So we're used to that. So if there's something that you think we might have that you don't see, we'd be more than happy to help you with that. Quarterly census of employment and wages. So this is employment by work. The basis of this program comes from the UI tax laws. So if you're covered and have to pay your quarterly wage reports, then you are covered under the quarterly census of employment and wages and counted. One of the main differences that this program does than the tax program is what we do is we really try to break out multi-establishments because we really want to get a count of where the businesses are in the state of Kansas. So if an employer has one UI account number that they're reporting all their businesses under, say you're a quick shop and you have 500 employees, well, you probably don't have 500 employees at a Topeka quick shop. So we ask you, where are all of those employees located at? And so that we can kind of help get a better accurate count of where within the industries, within the counties, within the state that our businesses are located. We also, another useful tool or useful information that comes from the QCW program is we can get a list of small businesses. So we have businesses by size class, if it's under 500, more than 500, how many employees, how many businesses, where they're located, information like that. And this, again, goes down to the county level by industry and comes out quarterly. There's about a 6-month lag just because we do work with BLS to clean the data, like I said. So if wages look weird or if, like I just talked about, employment, or if we think maybe they're in the wrong industry. So all of that comes from this data. And it's also the basis of all the information that we do in LMIS. Again, this is where you can find it on our website. 2-year and 10-year projections. Our labor economists do this. These are the 7 regions that we do the estimates for. Basically, it's the 5 local areas, only we've taken local area 1 and kind of broke it down into 3 different areas. Again, these are based on staffing patterns that we get from the Kansas Wage Survey. How we define job openings due to growth and due to decline. Again, I know I'm running through this, so I'm trying not to take up too much time. This is where you can find the projections data. This is some of the data that comes from it. So we have a base year, employment, education, training. That's required. That's typical for those occupations. High demand occupations are based on that 2-year and 10-year outlook and our job vacancy data. So these are occupations that are in high demand in the state, again, by the 5 local areas. Each occupation gets a score of 30. We do this annually. We also have high demand, high wage occupations. And so this includes an above average demand and area wage. Because as you can imagine, a high demand occupation could be something like a retail salesperson, which is always overturning, always has a lot of turnover, so it's high demand, but it's not really one that we would want to promote or provide, obviously, any educational money towards this. We want someone to work the career pathways through the Department of Education and Board of Regents and come out with a high wage, high demand job. And this is where you can find that. And again, just examples of the data that comes out of that. And then this is our interactive Tableau website. So that's the address for it if you want to look at it in the future. We have a lot of great things on there. That's the wage survey example. Okay, I know I ran through that, so thank you, and I stand for any questions.
Thanks for all that information. That was a lot, and you did a really good job of getting through it as quickly
you.
as you could. I really appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
And it is a lot of really good information that I think we can use as we make policy decisions based on whether we need jobs in Kansas or do we need workers in Kansas? And I think we're going to be faced with those types of decisions here pretty quick. Committee, is there any questions at this point? Senator Dahl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you have these surveys, what is the percentage of what you send out that you get back?
Thank you for your question. So we are required, since we do have a grant from the U.S. Department of Labor, we have certain percentages that we're required to achieve. So such as the wage survey, which is the Kansas employers for the occupational wages, we're required to get a response rate of 75% either in units or employment for each of the metropolitan areas and an overall state employment percentage of 65%. So those analysts are on the phone a lot begging for information to hit those deliverables. And then for our job vacancy survey, we do have a 65% response rate that we target for that also. Mm-hmm.
Okay, seeing no further questions for you, I do want to thank you again. And I guess over the last couple of years, unemployment seemed to be the main issue, and we do need to be reminded that the Department of Labor is the Department of Labor, not the Department of Unemployment, and you guys do a heck of a lot more than just unemployment, so yeah. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Chairman.
And Madam Secretary, are you up next?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I am. Thank you. So if you could throw the presentation back on. I'm going to go through quickly just some of the other programs that we have specifically under unemployment. So the first one I want to talk about is the employer support and work search programs. Oh. Is there any way you could jump to like slide 60 something? That's okay. My thumb would probably cramp up. All right, so we're going to be talking about employer support programs. So first of all, we do have an employer help desk, which is a dedicated line for any employers to ask about issues they might have. One successful program, okay, that showed up, that we started really marketing in February of 2021 was the shared work program. And then we've also want to remind folks that we have our fraud mitigation websites that folks can report fraud. So just quickly, I want to tout the shared work program just a little bit because it's been very successful. So it's very beneficial for both employees and employers. So employers can avoid layoffs. They can keep their valued employees. They can recover much faster when business starts to recover. And then for the employees, there's no loss in benefits such as health insurance. They can hopefully avoid a financial crisis. And they can also ensure that they don't have an employment gap on their resume. And so right now, we have 166 plans in effect with 127 employers and 4,600-ish employees. Part of House Bill 2196 was establishing a My Reemployment Plan, which is designed to get employees back into the workforce. And so if they have received 3+ consecutive unemployment payments, they are automatically enrolled in the My Reemployment Plan. And actually, Mike Bean from the Commerce Department is here if you have any questions about how that's going on their end, but from our end, it's going quite well. They administer the program. And then those are some statistics on how many people have participated in the program. Now we'll just kind of do a quick overview of unemployment. I'm sure you guys have seen, we keep track of how many claims and the amount of benefits that we've paid out since the beginning of the pandemic. And you can see how much the employment rate has fallen. It's actually at 3.3% in December. So we are, I believe it was 3.2 pre-pandemic. So we're back there. You can see this one is very interesting. We thought it would be good to throw 2009 in there. So in your slides, you'll be able to see that, the high water mark in 2009, which we thought that there's no way on this God's green earth that we'd be able to go over what was from 2009, but you can see that we've nearly doubled that during the pandemic. Typically, just for a reminder, we administer 2 statewide unemployment programs under normal times, so that would just be regular unemployment, and then extended benefits. Extended benefits are triggered on and off by the U.S. Department of Labor. We have no control on when those go on and off, and that's basically triggered on during a time of high unemployment. But when the pandemic hit, a bunch of different unemployment programs were also created. So we have PUC, PUA, MEUC, FPUC, and LWA. So just a reminder, regular UI is up to 26 weeks. It's all dependent on what the unemployment rate is right now. Extended benefits I covered. PUC was an extension basically to regular unemployment benefits. PUA was the new program for basically gig workers. LWA was actually a disaster assistance fund administered by FEMA, not through the U.S. Department of DOL, and extended benefits. And then the last two programs were MEUC and FPUC. FPUC provided initially additional $600 a week, but during the summer it was brought down to $300 a week. So again, all those programs have expired. Let's see, just a little bit about the health of our trust fund. Right now, we're at about 670, why can I not say that word all of a sudden? $670,000 in our trust fund, so million, golly. Sorry, I obviously needed more coffee this morning. Just a quick graph on the call volume and the chat volume. You can see that in August, we had a little bit of an increase. We assume that is because the federal programs were ending and people had a lot of questions that they wanted to ask, but we're down to the 200,000. So our contact center support staff numbers, House Bill 2001, I can answer any questions about that. Mr. Chair, if that's okay with you later, if you have questions about that.
I do have a few questions left over from this morning for you, but we'll wait.
Okay, sounds good. We'll go through these. So I'll briefly go over the types of fraud that we're seeing, so I'm sure that's going to be related to a lot of questions that we're going to have this afternoon. So simple complaint fraud. Oops, I went back one. It involves intentional miscommunication, misrepresentation. There's employer fraud where there might be, fake employees. And then there's also, of course, complex fraud schemes. Identity theft, which we're all very familiar with, but then there's also the massive organized crime fraud networks that we've been combating. So just a few things that we've been doing. I don't want to get into too many details in open session on how we prevent fraud, but we do scan for IP addresses. So that's the address of the geographic location of the computer that comes in, and so we automatically block some of those. We do have identity verification and multi-factor authentication as our front door, and then we do have some more internal tools related to reviewing the pay file each morning, doing cross checks, participating in the NASWA Data Integrity Hub, and then we also use some analytical tools as well. A brief update on where we are in modernization. As you know, this is not our first trying to modernize the system. So our initial upgrade was in 2002. Through various efforts, it was halted in 2011, and so nothing has been done since then. When the governor came into office, she ordered the previous secretary, Garcia, to begin drafting new modernization efforts. And so the agency went to a variety of states and had phone calls with a lot of states to get the best of breed system, lessons learned. If that's really the silver lining is of the states that have modernized, we can understand, some of the issues that we had and pitfalls and avoid those. And so, of course, the pandemic put a pause to all of that. As we started to get out of it a little bit, we thought it would be prudent to get back into the modernization update, and so we issued an RFP last April. And then of the process steps that we are in, we are completing the RFP process right now. So with that, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. I will stand for questions.
Committee, are there any questions for the secretary? Senator Tyson? Can you speak into a microphone?
Could she go back to the slide that had the call center employees and also the RFP process? I would like her to address to the committee the 4 companies that were possibilities and how we have narrowed them down and where we're at in that process, because it did not look good from this summer with the Oversight Council. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. So to address your questions, so we issued the RFP in April of 2021, and we received 4 responses. There are probably 8 to 10 vendors that are in this space right now, and as you can imagine, we're not the only state looking to modernize. So since this project is so large, and if you have specific questions, why are you doing this? Okay, I even had it on silent. I don't know how it got through. This large project, we have to run through the KDOL office of the Department of Administration and OITS. And so if you have additional details about that, Kelly Johnson is our project manager for this, and he'd be happy to answer any questions. But it's a very complex process. They vet a lot of the information, the scope of the project, the requirements of the project. And so we have gone through of the 11 steps that are required to complete the RFP process to get to the point where we can actually kick off the project. We are on finishing step 8. So as part of House Bill 2196 that established the Modernization Council, the Modernization Council helped us bring together kind of all the stakeholders at the table. So we had, the legislature, we had ourselves, we had employee representatives, and of course we had the business community. And so we discussed, at length, I think it was 100+ hours, what are those requirements, best in show. And so the selection committee, the project negotiating committee selected 2 of the 4 to bring in to do demos to staff, to our subject matter experts. And then the PNC, as you all well know, it's kept very close to the vest on who we have selected. So I can't go into any details on who has been selected. But in addition to the Employment Modernization Council, they had to issue a report to the LCC. And upon receiving of that report, the LCC was to say they accepted the report, which would allow us to sign a contract and have the funds released to move forward with modernization.
Madam Secretary, it's my understanding that those funds were released a couple of months ago.
We received the report from LCC on January 7th.
Okay. And you've chosen a company, and that company was chosen 2 months ago? And you're negotiating, what's the holdup? I mean, where are we why is it taking so long if it's already been over a year?
Well, we couldn't sign a contract until we received the report from the LCC, which happened in January. We've been in contract negotiations, so we're finishing that up, and then we'll be able to move forward in the other steps of the project.
So have you started any of the data migration that was going to be the slowest and hardest part?
We as an agency are preparing for that. Obviously, since we haven't signed a contract with the vendor yet, we haven't brought them in to look at things, but it has been part of the discussion of the scope.
Anything we can do to expedite the negotiations on the contract?
I will check back with the team and see if there's anything there is, but I appreciate that offer.
Any further questions? Representative Probst?
Thank you. One of my fears last year when we created the Modernization Council was that would actually delay this process. Can you speak to that at all?
Thank you, Representative. I would not say that it delayed the response. I would say instead it was helpful that we did dig very deep into unemployment insurance. And so just having all those voices at the table, I think will make sure that we get the best product available for the citizens of Kansas.
Senator Holland.
Just a question. How much input did the council?
For those online, the question is, how much influence did the Modernization Council have on the choice of the vendor?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say no influence. We had our subject matter experts were the ones with spreadsheets and spreadsheets of hundreds and hundreds of requirements and criteria that they went through to determine which would be a best match for us.
Senator, unfortunately, there was a RFP that was sent out during the negotiations of House Bill 2196, and it actually precluded the Modernization Council from even talking to the 4 vendors that responded. We had no input on the RFP, and we had no input. Actually, we did have a lot of input on some of the companies. We advised against several of them, so I'm looking forward to see which company they ended up choosing. The RFP was written rather narrowly and looked like it was written for a specific company. And my inkling is that that company will get this deal, but we'll have to wait and see till that's announced. Representative Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As a member of that council, I have a question just regarding the RFP and the process in general. And that is, I have expressed repeated concerns that legislators are too involved and might end up putting the state into a lawsuit. And so my question is can I have an update what might not be able to get it at this moment, but from legal in ways that we can, keep the state safe. Because if we end up getting sued by companies who were rejected because the council showed biased for or against certain companies, that's going to cost us money, and then we cease to be the fiscal conservatives that we all would like to strive to be. So, any updates or thoughts on that?
I can have our folks get you an update. Mhm.
Madam Secretary, you mentioned HB 2001 and the religious exemptions and medical exemptions. We talked about that briefly today in appropriations. I think a lot of us were disappointed to find out that we didn't entertain any complaints because there was no form until January 1st. Now that there's a form, there's been 160 cases filed with no answers. And it was indicated that you do have up to 60 days to look into these things. However, it's my understanding the bill was written in such a way that, and I've talked to leadership about this after our meeting this morning. It's my understanding that it's basically, did you apply for an exemption? Were you denied? Were you fired or punished? Then you send it over to the Attorney General, who will investigate and prosecute if needed. Why do we need 60 days to do that? Why can't it be a process like unemployment where everybody has a week to get back to the employer has a week to get back to you, and then you send it over for prosecution? We have 160 Kansans that are out of a job that shouldn't be, and we're sitting on our hands. Can you explain why it takes 60 days?
Certainly, Representative, and thank you. So the law from House Bill 2001 basically asks a series of questions. So the questions, and I don't have them verbatim, but basically, did your employer mandate a COVID-19 vaccination? If they did they offer a waiver of exemption for medical or religious beliefs? If that exemption was denied, were you fired or have any punitive action against you? And so if you answer yes to all those questions, then you could basically go on to the next steps of the form, which is where we start getting into the evidentiary portion of it. So the complainant can upload information that says, yes, here's my written request for a waiver, here's that it was denied. And so when that information is submitted to the Department of Labor, that kicks off the investigation. And so as part of due process, we have to send this information to the employer so they can have time to rebut or agree or whatever it might be with the employee. And so we do have a very tight schedule built in of when if either party asks for a hearing, they're entitled under due process to have a hearing. And so that is very much like kind of an appeal process. And so we have the process of how this will work with the hearing and when information is due back and when the final determination will be made. Certainly, we are shooting for more than or less than 60 days, but within statute, we do have 60 days. And I would say, too, of the 150 that have come in, it's actually, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but there have been some that people just are not qualified for, but they have gone ahead and sent it anyway, like they're self-employed. So that cannot continue. The employer did not have a vaccine mandate, but they continued on anyway. So there's a lot of, I think, misinformation to the public. And so we've created a lot of information on our website. We have a video, we have facts, we have an intake guide to hopefully help people better understand what this law is actually about and how to navigate through it.
Representative Clayton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So to that end, I am curious if we could have, and this might already be on the website, I have not yet checked, but do we have access to the types of industries where these complaints are being filed the most? Is it healthcare? Is it service work? Just kind of curious about that category.
Yeah, we can circle back with you. I don't have that kind of detail in front of me, but it's been the gamut. As you can imagine, there's been some national companies, the federal government, healthcare companies. So we'll try to narrow that down a little bit for you. Mm-hmm.
Representative Highland?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we go back to your slide on the contact center surge support, is that number for above the number of regular employees, or is that your current employees? And how much are we paying for the third party to work in that area?
And thank you, Representative, for that. I missed that, forgot about the second part of the senator's question. Sorry. There we go. All right, so within our call center, there's we lump these in together. They're not just call takers, and same with Accenture. There's claim support, so they could be working the phones one day, another day they could be keying in forms into the mainframe. So there's a variety of tasks that they could be doing. So we also have our adjudicators at KDOL, and then our training and quality assurance team, and then Accenture, again, the claim support, the PUA contact center, and then our fraud operations.
The total employees that are handling claims, or do you have other employees?
For KDOL? Yeah, we have, our unemployment staff is 100+ employees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Excuse me, the cost, Senator, we'll circle back with you and give you the total costs.
I believe they're contracted for $50 an hour at Accenture. Is that correct?
For the call center intake, yeah, but that does also include benefits and overhead.
And there's a total of 70, 88 or something like that?
Yeah, that's, yep.
And we can't do that in-house?
Not at this time.
Well, Senator Holland. Okay. Any further questions? Committee, you should be aware that we're currently having an uptick in fraud, an increase in fraud. I think we all received information on that yesterday. And Madam Secretary, can you please, you answered this, or Peter Brady did this morning. We let the committee kind of know what we're doing to get the word out for employers to look for that and get to you so we can stop it. We have a 1-week waiting period that keeps us from paying a claim. If we can get the information back in time, we can stop it. So can you kind of go through that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind, I'll ask Peter Brady to come. He gave a much better explanation.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Peter Brady, Deputy Secretary at the Kansas Department of Labor. So I know this committee, or both committees, heard from Phil Hayes yesterday, and Phil and I spoke last week about the increase in the initial claims numbers. The first thing I'd want to note too is that obviously it's something the agency is aware of and monitoring very closely. The increase we're talking about here is maybe about 1,000 to 1,500 a week, not in the tens of thousands we saw when we had a much more serious fraud surge. So to level set here a little bit, the scale is drastically lower, but it's still an indication that we need to remain vigilant. I'd also note too that while you're seeing an increase in the total number of initial claims being filed, the week-to-week payout is not changing substantially. Now, the initial claim numbers that are reported out by the agency include all initial claims filed. That's legitimate claims that end up being entitled to benefits. That's individuals who file for unemployment who are found either not eligible or not entitled to benefits. And that would also include any fraudulent claims. But the only ones that pay out are, the ones that pay out, right? So that's why there is sometimes a discrepancy in that number. Now, the other point I note too is that, we have the front door system the Secretary mentioned, ID verification, and then two-factor authentication through our vendor Okta. That's a great solution that covers 90 to 95% of the fraudulent claims we need to stop. But we still do a lot more work that the Secretary kind of talked about on the back end. We run analytics on these claims to see if there's common patterns that would be associated with fraud. We run these through the Integrity Data Hub from the National Association of State Workforce Agencies. So we can see if there's data elements in these claims that match fraudulent claims that have been stopped in other states and a few other efforts. The other thing that I think the chairman alluded to was we're in a different situation now in that in the prior fraud time period, there was no waiting week because we had waived it in hopes of getting relief to Kansans earlier as they filed throughout the pandemic. With that waiting week in place now, it's at minimum 1 week before any benefits go to an individual because that first week of unemployment is not compensable under the statute with the waiting week in place. What that also does is gives the agency more time to review the claims, more time to ensure that only the claims that are paying out each week are the ones that are legitimate, entitled, and non-fraudulent claims. One thing that the agency is working to get out by the end of this week, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is a notice to employers that's going to remind the employer community about what to look for, how to report fraud, how to ensure that information gets to our agency. Because I think one thing that's very important to note is at the end of the day, when we are combating fraud, the employer community is our greatest ally in identifying this information and stopping it quickly. They've been very good in doing that so far, so we want to ensure we remind them about what the processes are and how to get in contact with us should they need our assistance.
Any questions for Deputy Secretary on that? Okay. Oh, Representative Auerkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when an employer is notified of a unemployment claim and the employer gets the notice and it's a fraud, right? The person still working at the business. They notify the Department of Labor. What's the process from there?
Yeah, thank you, Representative. And one thing that I meant to mention previously that would be helpful to know too, just because an employer has received a notice of an unemployment claim doesn't mean anything about the payment status of that claim. The only thing it means is that that individual or someone using that individual's information initiated the claim process. It doesn't mean in any capacity funds have gone out. But that form will tell the employer, how to report this as fraudulent or not legitimate. We also have our reporting channels through reportfraud.ks.gov, our report fraud website, which has the fax number and the phone line. And then employers that use the side system can report it in that manner. So we try to provide as many avenues as possible to get that information to the agency. Once that information arrives at the agency, we run a nightly batch process that, the way the mainframe works is information is put in all day. At night, when the system goes down, the mainframe runs several processes to determine who's eligible for benefits, who's going to receive payment, who's going to have non-monetary codes added to their file, that type of thing. One of the first processes that runs is all of the reported fraud from that day adds a flag to that claim that basically says, regardless of anything else, this claim will not pay out until this flag is addressed. So it ensures that no payment goes out, or if any payment was set to go out, it's stopped at that time.
Do you have any? One of the largest complaints is we're not answering the phone all the time, and there's a long hold time. Can we assign some of these surge callers to receive phone calls from businesses? Because from what I'm hearing, I guess the report yesterday, 56% of the claims that companies are receiving are on current employees that did not file, and 5% is somebody that's never worked at the company. And we need to get that information to you as quickly as possible. And so can we have a link on the website to at least report it so someone can type in the information so you can get it right away and get to work right away, or have a dedicated phone number for just that and have surge callers on those lines?
Yeah, absolutely, Mr. Chairman. So I think the Secretary ran through the slides pretty quickly. We do have a dedicated employer help desk to help employers with fraud issues, tax questions, things of that nature. On our report fraud form as well, there's sections for the employers to submit their employees, either one by one if it's just a one-off fraud report, or if they do receive multiple, that they can enter those all in at once. That's all information that we're going to kind of highlight and review when we send out just that reminder to the employer community. And Mr. Chairman, I'd add too that Julie and I can ensure that the committee staff gets a copy of that notice if any of you would like to share it with your constituents or business groups you work with in your district.
Yeah, so we probably ought to get that to all the chambers of commerce as well, and I think you have their information. Representative Auerkamp, did you have a follow-up?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, just to follow up to the previous question. So, sorry, I didn't ask this or finish it earlier, but so going back to the unemployment claim that the employer logs on, says, hey, this is fraud. This employee is still here working at the business. They were never let go or they never quit. That claim gets flagged. Can you take us all the way through to the end of the process?
Sure. So once that claim has been flagged, if it's reported through the reportfraud.ks.gov website, there's a report that goes back to the person that filed it. that says this is the report and this is the case number if you need to work for local law enforcement if you have a ID theft issue. Now that that flag is on that claim, no, other actions can occur, but nothing can process payment on that claim until that specific issue is addressed. Now, one example that I think was very challenging earlier in the pandemic that we're finding better ways to work through is someone who was victimized by identity theft maybe very early on in the pandemic, and then say 6 months later, for example, they became unemployed through no fault of their own and needed to apply for benefits. The problem that they might face is that because they were previously victimized, that fraud flag is associated with their account. That's where we need to go and do identity verification. And it's not just identity verification. We then have to go back and ensure that the previous claim is cleared and voided out, ensure that all of the information, such as, if the bad actor had put in a direct deposit information, that that's cleared out as well. So we can verify the individual, start their claim, and, have it properly set up. That's something that, candidly, when we were fighting the levels of fraud was much more challenging, but we've put in place better processes to do so, to get those eligible individuals to benefits quicker. But what we'll be working through, and this will be tied to modernization, is how does that data get stored historically for someone who's been the victim, and then ensuring that that's not a roadblock to their future access to benefits. Candidly, Representative, it is a very complicated and challenging problem. It's one we've discussed at length in the Modernization Council at different times. It's something that improving our internal processes today helps with. And then when we get to the modernized system, that further helps us better serve those individuals. And I hope, did I work through I'm sorry, did I miss a part of the life cycle?
If I may, so the employer hops on the system, says, this is fraud. The employee's still working here. What happens next? How do you, that gets flagged? How does that claim then get denied and that whole claim file, if you will, get closed and completed?
Yeah, sorry, let me clarify, Representative. So the point at which that flag is added to the claim immediately suspends everything. From that point, there are two paths forward. Either one, when we get to the data cleanup of that, the claim is voided and closed out, right? And then it no longer is a element of concern. Or if before that period of time happens, like I discussed earlier, the legitimate individual needs to file for benefits, it then gets voided and closed out at that point in time. It's important to note that, when no benefits go out, when that flag gets added to show it was fraud, that's not going to reflect on the employer's charge statements. The employer won't have a impact to their tax rate or contribution rate. In cases where that has occurred, where employers have made us aware of that, we obviously immediately rectify it. And provisions in House Bill 2196 ensure that the agency can do that. But I think to answer your question, when I say that the flag has been placed, that puts the immediate stop and suspend on that claim. And then at a later date, that claim is then eventually voided out and is no longer reflected in the system. The only way it's in the system is the historical point where we can look back and see what happened. And, that's information that we use when we work with federal law enforcement agencies to track down the criminals and fraudsters that have perpetrated this.
Okay, well, you got off easy. We're seeing no further questions. We'll go ahead and move on. I think that's the only thing, that's the only item on the agenda. House committee will introduce bills next week when we come back. And I would, the senators, we'll all be watching you today on the floor. I instructed my committee to watch your committee meeting from the other night. I thought there was a lot of really good discussion on the Apex bill. And so hopefully my committee will do that and they'll follow you today. And we're prepared to work that bill should it come over to the House, and we have it teed up for Monday or for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And I'd ask everybody to look around the room to see the individuals on the Senate committee and the House committee. These are the people that you want to meet with if you want to have any input on bills that are in the other committee, or if you have a bill that goes over to the other committee, these are the people that you'd probably want to hook up with to sell your bill to help it get through. So we appreciate all the hard work you're doing on the Senate side. And with that, we're adjourned.